Shalom, Kal Halal Yam La Yahweh, Ba'Shem Yahweh Shai, Ba'Shem Racha HaKudash. Double honors to the apostles, elders, and bishops who rule well, who I learned this truth from, and salutations and blessings to you elect, starting with the 144,000. So in this lesson, I'm going to touch on this term Hellen, right? Because right now, you know, with everything going on about the scriptures and the Christians and coming up against the Israelites and pointing out, oh, what about the Hellen, the Greek? It says Greek. It doesn't say Israelite, right? And this is not going to cover, obviously, everything. You need to go into the history, which you wacky-tacky ass Christians, they're too lazy and stubborn, you know, and slothful to do, right? You're ignorant. So we're going to go into it a bit. This is John 12 and 20. I'm going to start here. It says, and there were certain Greeks among them that came up to worship at the feast, right? So see, someone will read this, right? Some unlearned person will read this, and they'll say it says Greek. So these were heathens, these were Edomites, right? That's what they'll say. The same came therefore to Philip, which was of Bethsaida of Galilee, and desired him, saying, Sir, we would see Yahushua. So even when we look up this word in the Edom, right, the word is Hellen. It says a Greek, either by nationality, whether a native of the mainland or of the Greek islands or colonies. In a wider sense, the name embraces all nations, not Jews, that made the language, customs, and learning of the Greeks their own. And this is complete fallacy. This is complete ignorance. And it's really not ignorant, because they know what they're doing. It's really willful lies, you know. That's what it is, willful lying. All right, there's a bunch of problems here, because first of all, when it says the first part of Greek, either by nationality, so a Greeks weren't the people that were called Hellenes. They were not only ethnic Greeks, meaning, you know, your original, which the original Greeks were Japhet, but you know who we're talking about, the Edomites. This is not referring to just ethnic Edomites. You had many nations who were Hellenized. Among those nations was a heavy population of Israelites who were Hellenized, right? So they make it their point to say not Jews. So it was all other nations except the Israelites that made the language, customs, and learning of the Greeks their own. Madness. Right down here it says a Hellen, a Grecian, or inhabitant of Hellas, by extension a Greek-speaking person, especially not a non-Jew. Now, in a sense, they are right, because an Israelite that knows they're an Israelite, they wouldn't go by a Hellen. They might be called a Hellenist, right? Because you have two separate terms. You got Hellenist, Hellenistas, and Hellen, right? A Hellenista or Hellenist is referring to Israelites who spoke Greek, but they knew they were Israelites. All right, they kept the law, statutes, and commandments. They spoke Hebrew, but they also spoke Greek. They understood Greek. Right? So when you go, for example, to Acts, the book of Acts 6 and 1, right? 1 sec, it's loading. Right, because you have different root words, right? This is something that a lot of Christians, they don't understand, and some of you Israelites, you don't understand, because you don't look up words. Here it says, and in those days when the number of the disciples was multiplied, there arose a murmuring of the Grecians against the Hebrews. Again, someone will read this and say, look, it says Grecian. Just like Cornelius, it says the Italian band. It's not talking about Israelites. Italians are white. Right? Unlearned, man. Because their widows were neglected in the daily ministration. So when we look up this word, now this app's messing up, man. Why are you playing with me now? There we go. The word here for Grecian is different. It's Hellenistas. which means a Hellenist. Go look up Hellenization. Look up that history. One who imitates the manners and customs or the worship of the Greeks and use the Greek tongue, used in the New Testament of Jews born in foreign lands and speaking Greek. Right? But again, you have two distinctions. You have Hellenistas or Hellenists, and you have a Hellen, which was it was more so of a status. You were born in Greece and you kept the customs, which you had Israelites that did so. You had Israelites that were scattered throughout Asia Minor, right? All throughout Greece, right? And they were forced to keep those customs. When you read the book of 2nd Maccabees 6 and 1, and 1st Maccabees chapter 1. Now, let's read this. This is from thoughtcode.com. Why were the ancient Greeks called Hellenes? It says, if you read any ancient Greek history, you'll see references to the Hellenic people and the Hellenistic period. These references describe only a relatively brief period between the death of Alexander the Great in 323 BC and the defeat of Egypt by Rome in 31 BC. It says Egypt, and particularly Alexandria, came to be the center of Hellenism, right? Because this was when they were pushing that ideology, but more so when a character named Antiochus IV, all right, Epiphanes, which he gave himself that name, Epiphanes, revelator. He was actually called Epimanes, I believe, which pretty much meant madman. They actually called Antiochus madman because he was a fucking madman. Right? He reveled amongst the commoners. He did a bunch of degenerate shit. Right? And under his rule, he actually forced the Israelites, because back in Alexander's time, Alexander pretty much left us alone because he witnessed a lot. He's seen a chariot. He's seen the high priest of the Most High. He's seen the temple. You know, he's seen that big ass chariot, and he let us alone. But you had Israelites still clinging during that time to wanting to try out, or maybe even just speak Greek. Right? That was already the start of Hellenization. But true Hellenization was when Antiochus gave that order, and he forbade the Sabbath days. He forbade you to circumcise your son on the 8th day. He conscripted you. He forced you to eat pork in front of the multitudes. Right? The end of the Hellenistic world came when the Romans took over Egypt in 30 BC with the death of Cleopatra. It says origin of the name Helen. It says the name comes from Helen, who was not the woman famed from the Trojan War, but the son of Deucalion and Pyrrha. According to Ovid's Metamorphoses, Deucalion and Pyrrha were the only survivors of a flood similar to the one described in the story of Noah's Ark. To repopulate the world, they throw stones which turn into people. The first stone they throw becomes their son Helen. Helen, the male, has two L's in his name, whereas Helen of Troy has only one. Alright, now look at this, who the Hellenes were. After the death of Alexander, some city-states came under Greek influence and were thus Hellenized. The Hellenes, therefore, were not necessarily ethnic Greeks as we know them today. Ethnic dealing with ethnicity, your ethnos, your seed. Right, reading on, it says instead they included groups we now know as Assyrians, Egyptians, Jews, Arabs, and Armenians, among others. There you go. They just gave you the real history right there, right? Because you had Israelites who were forced to take on Hellenization, to accept the customs of the Greek, and they taught their son, who never even heard of Moses, who never heard of the Torah, who never heard of the Red Sea, the Exodus, right? Purim. They never heard these things because they grew up literally of ethnic Greek, a Hellene. You wacky ass Christians, wacky tacky. It says as Greek influence spread, Hellenization even reached the Balkans, the Middle East, Central Asia, and parts of modern India and Pakistan. See, so that's some history. Now let's go here. This is from ancienthebrew.org. The Jews, the Greeks, and the Gentiles. Who are they? It says the word ethnos literally means nation. This word is used in the 2,000-year-old Greek Septuagint to translate the word. The word should be gawayim, which is other nations. Right? It says goy, which also means nation. A nation is any group of people living and working under one rule. Many different nations are mentioned in the Bible. Alright, now let's skip down. It says translating the Greek word ethnos in the New Testament as Gentile is problematic. While the word Gentile does mean one who belongs to a tribe or clan, it has come universally mean a non-Jew. But as we have seen, the word goy and ethnos do not mean a non-Jew. They mean one who belongs to a tribe or clan. Now the word goy or gawayim, which is nations, that means other nations. But guess what? In certain contexts, you Israelites, right, us as a nation, we became other nations. That's why the Lord said, I will make them who were not called by me, roughly paraphrasing, a nation, a people. I will call them my people. Right, he mentions that in the Apocrypha, in the book of 2nd Ezra, I believe, which we can get something real quick. That's on it's on my mind. 2nd Ezra 5. This scripture popped in my mind. 2nd Ezra 5 and no, sorry. 2nd Ezra 2. My bad. 2nd Ezra 2 and 7. Actually 6. It says that this is dealing with Israel, that thou bring them to confusion and their mother to a spoil, that there may be no offspring of them. Right? Let them be scattered abroad. See? Among the heathen, let their names be put out of the earth, for they have despised my covenant. See? And that's exactly what happened. We're reading during the time of the Greeks. Their name was put out. They were not called Israelites. It was illegal for you to be called an Israelite, to call yourself a Jew, to proclaim that. Which actually, you know what? Let's get that. Let me see if I can find it. Right? It says 2 Maccabees 6 and 6. Neither was it lawful, meaning what? There was literally a law, which the punishment was what? Death. The punishment was death. Alright? Just like the time we're coming into, you're not gonna. It's gonna be illegal for you to call yourself an Israelite, to proclaim the second coming of Yahushua, to reject the MOTB, and the penalty will be death. It will not be a fine. It's not gonna be 6 months in jail. Okay? So check it out. Neither was it lawful for a man to keep Sabbath days or ancient feasts, or to profess himself at all to be a Jew or Yahudah. Alright? So check this out. Who are the ethnos or nations, plural of ethnos, mentioned in the New Testament? See? Now he goes into the lost 10 tribes here, but I'm going to go and read this part, which is imperative. It says the Greeks. The book of Maccabees, one of the books of the Apocrypha, tells the story of the Jewish revolt about 150 years before the time of the New Testament. The Greeks, led by Antiochus Epiphanes, conquered the land of Israel and forced the Jews to leave their national heritage and the Torah and begin following the Greek culture. Because of the Jews' hatred for all things Hellenistic, including the culture and language, Judas Maccabee led the revolt against Antiochus Epiphanes, destroying the Greeks and slaughtering those Jews that had adopted the Greek language and culture. This revolt demonstrates the Jewish hatred of the Hellenistic culture and the incorrect assumption that the Jews freely adopted the Greek language during the time of the New Testament, which again, a lot of them did switch over and they freely did adopt it. You had that small multitude remnant, right, of the Maccabees, right, their descendants, the people with them that fled to the mountains, right. Down here it says this divide between the Jews who remain faithful to the Torah and the Jewish culture, and those who rejected the Torah and adopted the Greek culture, continued to exist into the 1st century AD. See, the Jews that adopted the Greek culture and language were called Hellenes. Here you go. So when we went here and we look up, let me see that again. John, was that John 12? Right. A Hellene, right? And they make it their purpose to say not Yahweh, right? But this is incorrect. That's why the blue letter is not 100% on point, right? You'll get messed up if you go by that. So it says, oh, so like right here. See, it says the Jews that adopted the Greek culture and language were called Hellenes, Oxford Greek Dictionary. So this is the real history. The word Hellenes is the word used in the New Testament where it is usually translated as Greek, but sometimes Gentile. See, you got to know what you're reading, man. The Ruach HaKodesh has to flow with you and break this down, or else you're not going to see it. People are not going to see it anyway. Even though we're breaking this down, the brothers are breaking all these words down and the history. You know, you're still going to have jakes that are blind. That's fine. All right? Shall your unbelief make the you know, the works of the Most High, roughly paraphrasing, of none effect, right? For what if some did not believe? So what? All right. It says, but sometimes Gentile, but does not refer to native Greeks. So I'm reading it again. The word Hellenes is the word used in the New Testament where it is usually translated as Greek, but sometimes Gentile, but does not refer to native Greeks. The opposite of what blue letter said, but to Jews who have adopted the Greek culture and language. See, the Jews, in contrast to the Hellenists, are those Jews that remain faithful to the Torah and rejected the Greek culture and language. Now, for the most part, yes, but you had again Hellenists, who were Israelites that kept their customs, but they spoke Greek. But amongst Israelites, you had a divide. You had other Israelites who were so zealous and you can maybe say extremist, you know, or just so bold that they said, F that, we're not even going to speak Greek, right? And there was an ancient saying where they said it was better to eat pork than to speak Greek. See? All right, so anyway, this is some understanding on the Hellenes, right? When you go to John 7, to the dispersed among, right? It said, then said the Jews among themselves, whither will he go that we shall not find them? Will he go unto the dispersed among the Gentiles and teach the Gentiles? So now you can understand with certain translations, right, what it's really going into. Just because it says Gentile or Greek or Scythian or barbarian in certain scriptures, you got to go into that history, man. The Scythians, those are majority Jakes. When you do your research, Scythians, right, those were Israelites. That's where you actually get the word Sake, and then later Saxon, the warlike people, the sons of Isaac. Hellen, see the word there for Gentile. Will he go will he go into the dispersed, the Israelites dispersed among the Gentiles, and teach the Gentiles? So you gotta know what it's talking about, man. The dispersed diaspora going into of Israelites dispersed among the foreign nations, and they don't know that they're Israelites because they're in the Gentile state of mind. See, they don't know that they're Israelites, and that he may teach the Gentiles, the Hellene, not Jews. That's what I got to keep pushing that, because that's what they're pushing. All right. Anyway, I hope you found some edification in that. I want to say Kal Halal Yom La Yahweh, B'Hashem Yahweh Shai, B'Hashem Ruach HaKodesh. Shalom to the elect.